So, good evening everybody. That kind of takes the biscuit, does that, so to speak. I think this is the first time ever that I've started streaming by forgetting to start streaming. Because that's what I've just done. I've been streaming now for, at least 5 minutes before I suddenly thought, I don't actually remember. Well, two things came to mind. I don't actually remember pushing the start streaming button. And the second thing was, Stream Deck has a viewer count on it. Now, whilst most of the time it says 0, but when you're not streaming it doesn't say anything. So obviously it only reports back whilst you're actually live. And it didn't have a number on it. And I'm looking at that and going, look over there and I can't see the green. Because I usually have the green because I've got enough bandwidth. And I go, closer look. No streaming. So that is literally the first time I've started streaming without actually starting to stream. Ah well, that's the first. So, as I was saying, starting with a pair of these. One of these. In order to do things with those little tiny rings, 3.2mm rings they are, doing this bracelet, or it will be a bracelet, although I am thinking about seeing if I can get a memory wire down the middle, which will then turn it into a bracelet that doesn't need a clasp. But I may or may not do that, because A, I can see that being quite hard to, well, maybe to get in smoothly, we shall see. But also it needs to be longer if you do that. But the first job, unfortunately, means that we need to have lots of rings in order to be able to weave lots of rings. So the first part of this exercise, to continue that, is to open a lot of this pile of rings. And unfortunately with chainmail, this is something you can't get away with. I mean, I guess, well, I suppose that's a little bit disingenuous, because if you were speed weaving some of this, which I can't do in this particular way of weaving it, I might have been able to do it if I'd done it a different way, which I didn't think about until after I'd done quite a bit, so I wasn't going to restart. But because with speed weaving, some of these would be closed and I wouldn't be opening them then, I'd be closing them, but I still have to prepare the rings. Still, this is part of doing chainmail, I'm afraid. Well, I'm not afraid, it's, you know, but if you're watching, doing this is just a fairly simple exercise. Now, what are you doing, Emmy? You want to sit anywhere as long as it's on something. Yeah. Well, you know, if enough people say so in chat, I might bring the pussycat up onto the stream. Well, of course, you may well just join of her own accord shortly, if she decides to jump up. So, I've got the extra camera running tonight. I figured since I spent the weekend trying to make it work, and it had its debut on the stream last night, that I might as well put it to use tonight. Of course, that means I had to wait a couple of minutes for the camera to boot up. Luckily the operating system was already booted, but I then got to log into the camera in order to boot the camera software. Which I still find rather amusing, having to boot a camera. She makes me nervous when she's doing things like that, because you never know what's going to go where. See, a bit like Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule the rings. This is the master ring, which I use in this exercise of opening rings because it's faster than doing it with 2 pairs of pliers, which you don't actually have to get hold of the ring with both. You only need to get hold of it with 1 pair of pliers. The other one you just put it in the slot and twist, which saves time. Because that's one thing about making these things, is they consume time, especially Micromaille. Just because, I mean, I love the stuff, but it's really time consuming to make, which makes it expensive as well. But yeah, it's sort of 1 inch of Micromaille takes an hour to do, whereas you know at the bigger scales with bigger rings, you can do the same sized, well, the same length of bracelet in an hour, the whole thing. So you know, it makes a difference. Right, so there we go. So what I was just thinking of then is, for some reason I thought I might do a pyrography tomorrow night, just to do something different, because I've been doing the magic dots for a few days now. It's a nice restful thing, is magic dots. You know, well, I was about to say you don't have to sort of worry about, you know, making sure I get this ring the right way and get it in that slot such that I can open it, and only open it so far, and that's just in opening these rings. Before we start closing them, I don't have to get frustrated by trying to pick the things up, because these are so tiny. They are almost impossible to pick up with the pliers. You can do it, but it does, you know, it could, with any smaller rings than this, it would be really difficult. But so what was I thinking of that? Yeah, so I like making chainmail, but I also like the pyrography, and it's another, you know, that's still a project I've got to finish as well as this one. Yeah, I should really finish this one, and what I should really do is actually get the stainless steel bracelet into photographed, so it can go into the store. Both of them. Stores, that is. Because it's there. It's done. He says putting that completely where only 1 camera can see it. Actually, what I ought to do, I guess, is tip that camera like that. Now this is quite challenging to do these days, because I've now got something like a 3-second delay on that camera, which makes doing things like that quite awkward. So the other thing I've got to finish is my 3D printer. Then, once I've got the 3D printer finished, I might actually even be able to make myself a case to put the camera that is made from a Raspberry Pi, this one here, in a case, because at the moment the camera itself is literally taped with masking tape to the front of the case. See, frustration. Trying to pick up that ring and then dropping it does not help. The bigger rings are easier to pick up, literally just because the diameter of the wire of these rings is so small that it literally the jaws almost cannot get around the circumference of it. It's so tiny that they almost the way they grab it means that they don't get past the sort of halfway point, so they tend to squeeze, literally to squeeze the ring out of the jaws. So in picking these up, I am doing my best to pick them up by where the join is, because there's a little, before they're opened, there is a slight twist already in them. They're very slightly open because of the way they're manufactured, which means that there's a little bit more for the pliers to actually grab hold of. Tonight's the first night I've ever started streaming before I started streaming. Never done that in the past. I've started streaming with the camera muted, or the microphone muted. I've even started streaming on using the wrong scene, so the cameras were inverted or things like that, because at one time I positioned the cameras differently for things like a chainmaille stream to a carving stream, because you want things like close-ups on jewellery that you can't work with when you're doing carving, for example. You want a more overall shot when you're carving. And so I literally used to have different scenes. In fact, I used to have completely different OBS configurations. Because over time I've learned that's not really a good way of doing it. And I've sort of adjusted my OBS setup to be what it is today. Which is a lot more convenient broadcasting wise. So I'm going to open this pile that I've got in front of me before I start weaving them, and then I'll weave some and we'll see how far we get. I've no idea how many I'm opening, I'm just opening them. They'll always come in useful even if I were to open more than I need to finish this bracelet, because the next thing I want to try with this, doing with this micromaille, will require me to open them for that as well, so it's not wasted effort, even if I do too many. So it'll soon be winter again. Actually, talking of winter, it'll soon be Christmas. If you're interested in this sort of jewellery as a present, I do sell it. Kind of a sideline, but I do sell it. So if you're interested and wanting to maybe think about buying some of it, either for yourself if you're going somewhere at Christmas where you might feel like wanting to show off some of this stuff. Now that applies whether you're a man or a woman, a boy or a girl, because this stuff is, quite a lot of this stuff can easily be worn by either. Some people might prefer different colours, but you know, It's a metal chain. So it kind of works for everybody. And there are necklaces, bracelets and anklets if you're into those different styles, as well as earrings is the word I was looking for. But in different metals, so stainless steel, that one there, stainless steel. This is aluminium, that's stainless steel, that's heavy. This is light. Titanium, niobium, bright aluminium, which is a bit like anodised aluminium, except it's not being anodised, so it will tarnish. It goes sort of a grey colour when that happens, but that's just what aluminium does. But if you're interested in any of that, then the shop is on Etsy, saragonart.etsy.com, and that will that's got, I think there's 40 different things there at the moment, different bracelets, necklaces, cuffs, anklets, earrings, sets. So if you're interested in any of them, take a look. Yeah, could be a nice Christmas present if you don't want something like that for yourself. Even Christmas colours if you really want them. The red, green, gold and purple is really nice. Or make really nice combinations for Christmas. And the pictures even show purple as purple, which is kind of amusing, because actually that's one of the things I'm going to have to try with this Raspberry Pi camera here. Just see whether it thinks purple is purple, because this camera doesn't. This camera thinks purple is blue and shows it as blue. Which is kind of amusing. It's almost become a stream joke. And now here we have the not purple, or the not blue purple, or this is the magic purple. So sort of things like that. If you hear that being discussed, we're talking about the purple that shows up on stream as blue. The camera obviously has a colour bias, but haven't quite worked out what that colour bias is, because it's not blue as such, which you might think, because I've, in post-processing sometimes I've tried knocking back the blue, and that doesn't restore the purple colour. And what's the complementary colour for blue? I can never remember. That's red and green. It's red and green, isn't it? So that's probably yellow. Red and green. Yeah, red and green's yellow, I think. Try adding yellow in, and that doesn't do it either. So I'm just trying to think. I probably even tried assuming that perhaps there wasn't enough red and adding that in, but that in itself is, well, I was about to say it's highly unlikely, but having said which, of course, that may be a compensation the camera does add, because of course tungsten light is very orange. So if it's knocking down orange to try and get the white balance, or effectively that's what white balance is doing, knocking down orange. I hadn't thought about that before. Orange is, got a bit of red in it. So maybe it's reducing, the effect is of reducing the red because it's filtering for tungsten lamps. And of course one of the things I'm not doing here is using a tungsten lamp. I'm using LEDs, and in fact I'm using cool LEDs. They're not quite daylight cool, but they are still cool. So the white balance will be different. Although it is supposed to be automatic white balance, but there again, to automatic white balance it needs to have a reference as to why it looks like in this light, or to do it properly. That's what it needs. It may just be guessing. Haven't thought about that. And of course, what on earth the Pi camera will see, I'm not sure, because that's a new IR camera, so it's got an infrared component mixed in with it as well. I do wish she'd stop moving around. That's Emmy, who you might actually be able to hear, given that this microphone is as sensitive as it is, moving around. Now, if there's a lot of people on stream, I might be inclined to show her, but I don't want to disturb her at the moment. She's having a good wash for a start. Well, I was about to say that ring went somewhere and I don't know where. When I moved to the studio, it was surprising how many rings that had escaped that I found on the carpet that you couldn't see before, but when you went to the studio, they were kind of immediately obvious. I think I must have found about 50 rings. Of course, at that point, they just went in the bin, A, because I wasn't going to start and sort them out, but B, you don't actually know why they were on the floor, whether they escaped, just knocked, or they sprung and therefore might be scratched, or anything like that. So right, so weaving time. So where did I get up to, and what weave am I know what weave I'm doing. I'm doing round maille, but that does rely on me now working out where to, well, remember you have to do round maille for a start. I've switched pliers. Just realised that because these, what's they're cold, but the handles are not warm. And this is one of the slightly frustrating things about Micromaille, is it's micro-sized. And micro-sized means tiny, which means trying to hold it can be a little bit of a frustrating experience. There we go. Now I need 2 pairs of pliers, so I don't know why I picked them up that way. I can't close with the ring. Some people, I believe, probably can, but not necessarily at this size. They'd be doing it on the bigger rings. Have I just done something which is right or wrong? No, that's right. Well, it would be if that ring hadn't relaxed. Yeah, it's gone in the right place. But I need to just give that closure a tweak. There. One of the things that you get with aluminium is it has a slight memory. When it's been in a particular position or bend for some time, it remembers that. So when you bend it out of position, as I've done here to open it, it tries to go back to its original position, but then settles in the open position. So when you close it, it tries to open itself again. Now sometimes it takes a couple of hours to do that, and other times it does it fairly quickly, and sometimes it doesn't do it at all. Just depending. Especially depends on whether they've been work hardened. But Now I am so reasonably trying to make sure they are all closed, because going back afterwards and trying to close them if they're sprung slightly isn't going to be necessarily all that easy. Now fortunately as well, now Micromaille doesn't grow very quickly. Well, it does in relation to the size of the rings. I mean, it grows literally as quickly as its bigger brethren do in terms of relative size. You know, it grows by one ring row when you put a ring row in, as does a bigger one. It's just that one ring row is about 2 millimeters. And of course on bigger rings, one ring row could be about 5 millimeters. So of course the bigger ones grow quicker. But that's the only difference with, well, only difference with working with Micromaille, if you count the fact that the rings are so tiny as not being a difference. It is just, well, that's kind of the only awkward thing about this, as opposed to more regular sized chainmaille, is the tiny size. Is, you know, is working at the tiny size is a skill in its own right, just because you're talking about such tiny objects. You know, I'm trying to close these. I'm trying to close a bigger ring, for example, where the wire diameter may be sort of 1.2 millimeters. You've got quite a bit of leeway, relatively speaking, before it becomes sort of noticeable. Whereas this wire diameter, I think, is what, about 0.1, is it? He says, having a look, it's written on the label. 0.6 millimeters, which means that you have even less leeway on closing a ring. You have to be a lot more accurate. Because I mean, let's say just, you know, arbitrarily, you know, if you sort of had to be half a diameter out before you noticed the fact that the ring wasn't closed properly. On 1.2 millimeters, of course, half a diameter is 0.6, 50%. On these tiny rings, it's still 50%. But that 50% is 0.3 millimeters. And if you can imagine 0.3, I mean, if you think about it, 3/10 of 1 millimeter. So when you think about your ruler, 1 millimeter, just how tiny that looks, and then think of it being a third of that. That's how much leeway I've got in, well, you know, I've made that up. It's actually less than that, because half a wire diameter would be really noticeable. So it's a lot smaller, but you know, that was just an illustration. And of course, with such tiny rings, you can't get your fingers in as easily either. Everything is done with the points of these pliers. Indeed, to some extent, I could do with some finer pointed ones for some of this work, but I might do with what I've got. Have I done that? Yes, I have done that right. Keep checking. Always keep checking. Especially if you're not 100% sure. just because correcting mistakes isn't easy. You can do it, but as you get into these micro scale, it gets really significantly harder to correct a mistake once you've gone past it. So if you see a mistake somewhere down here, an inch down, at this scale, just partly because even getting the pliers in to a ring in here would be so difficult because of the size of the pliers is approaching the size of the ring. It becomes a really difficult task to take a ring out of the middle of the weave and then put one back. I'm still on not on all frames. Which way am I doing? When do I need to go on that camera? That way. Okay. So that camera actually probably wants to turn a little bit that way. Adjusting cameras is currently a little bit difficult. Well, literally because of the Raspberry Pi camera. In order to not confuse your brain whilst you're watching. Or even to confuse mine whilst if I try and do anything in the view that I can see from here. These cameras have a delay built into them so that they all synchronize, so that when you see me do something on this camera, you're more or less seeing me do it on that camera at the same time. It looks normal, shall we say. And you don't get sort of a weird sort of effect in your head when you see two cameras completely out of synchronization to each other. And by completely out of synchronization, I'm meaning something like 3 seconds apart. So what you have to do is take your slowest camera, in this case the Raspberry Pi, which is 3 seconds slower than the webcams, and then adjust, delay your webcam. What you're then going to do is delay your webcams by the same 3 seconds in order that something that you can see on one of them appears on all the others at exactly the same time. You then have to synchronize audio to the camera that you're watching me at, so that when I talk it doesn't look like I'm being dubbed. Badly dubbed. Yes, that's right. Keep on checking, make sure it's going right. So I may not actually continue using the Raspberry Pi camera. I did think about maybe, I'm still not staying on frame on that one, am I? I did think about trying to maybe use it for doing things like this, which is like a where it could perhaps act like a close-up camera. If I got quite, was able to get quite close to it, for example up here. Or even potentially just have it so that I can do things like come up close to it. To show you me fiddling, trying to get these in. To go through there like that and like that. But I'd probably have to adjust that camera then to zoom in, because of course that view isn't seeing it very close. Still got to learn how to use that camera. Alright, that one is that pair there. Yeah, you also got to keep track of the fact that you've just put 3 on that layer, because you don't want to try and put more on. I've done that many a time, and trust me, it's the wrong thing to do. I can see that light flashing on the pie just out the corner of my eye. Keeps me making me look to wonder what it is I'm seeing. So another quiet night on Twitch. We are getting towards the winter, I guess, so hopefully there'll be more people watching as we get into the winter season. Because it's rather quiet here in chat, you know. If you're out there lurking, you are welcome to say hello. And ask any questions if you want about this or anything else that you may see done on stream. As it says I'm a variety streamer, because that's precisely what I am. He's seeing me make chainmail here, jewellery, but jewellery is also made with beads. And also on top of beads, cord weaving. I saw that ring wasn't quite, there it is. Well, not just cord weaving, but Japanese cord weaving. Kumihimo it's called, or Kumihimo braiding. It's quite fun to do. And make some nice cords which you can then use as bracelets or cords for other things, for necklaces or anything really that you want a cord for. Carving, wood carving, relief carving with very sharp chisels, as it usually says on the I've just put that through there, and should I have done? Or is it just the way it's sat? No, it's just the way it's sat. Now that was a noise I haven't heard before. That came from my phone. I do not know what that's intrigued me. Be right back. Okay, that was just Facebook going, "Hey Zaragana, people haven't heard from you for a while, write a post." Which I'm sure I did one last week, so I think sometimes it doesn't know what it's talking about. I find Facebook quite funny anyway. It does things like sort of say, you know, add a phone number so your friends can find you. And it's kind of like if they can't find if they don't know my Facebook, name, why would them knowing my phone number make it any easier for them to find me? Because they don't know my name. They don't know my phone number either. But they're more likely to know my name than the phone number, because of course you get things like Skype and what have you, and email and instant messaging, and phone numbers are not the first thing people think of these days. Right, so yeah, I was telling you about the other things that are done on stream. Scraper board. It's a black board. When you scrape it, it turns white. So you get black and white. You can make images with black and white. Done for many years in photographs and things like that. You can do the similar things with scraper board. It's not as easy as a black and white photograph, but you can do things that look quite amazing with it. And if you look in the third panel down on the right hand side, where past work is being displayed, if you see anything that comes up there that's sort of a black background with white on it, that's scraper board. And there's pyrography on the channel. The art of colouring wood by cooking it with heat. Otherwise known to a lot of people as wood burning, but we don't burn any wood. So it's a bit of a misnomer, it's a bit of a misleading description, because for most pyrographic artists, they do not burn the wood. Now when you're putting these rings through, sometimes it's easier to put them through in one direction than it is another direction, and that's something that you kind of have to learn. And it can also be different depending on the size of the rings. Sometimes a smaller ring goes through one direction better than another, and it's all to do with the way that you've twisted the ring to open it and where the gap is, basically. So another thing that's done on stream, punchcraft. That's something most people have not actually ever heard of. It's a trade name for something that's rather like the way in which rugs are made, but where a rug does it by machine, you drive what looks like a hypodermic noodle. By hand. Why do I say hypodermic noodle? I think it was one of my cousins that couldn't say a hypodermic needle, and always used to, I'm sure she used to say hypodermic noodle, or yeah, it was something like that. It was a bit like a, you know, the vowels got switched, but always used to be funny. So, what is relatively speaking slow but steady progress? But with Punchcraft, like rugs, you can put patterns on there. Patterns being pictures. So when you see something in the third panel that's round, it's got a train on it, and looks a bit woolish, that's Punchcraft. And there's 2 pictures in that roll. Both of them are of locomotives. Magic dots was something that you will have seen last night us doing, which is basically putting dots onto a sticky, I was about to say sticky back plastic, onto a sticky panel to create pictures. That's why that looked odd. Done also glass engraving. So I'm not sure any shows up. I don't think any shows up in the roll because I basically haven't photographed any of the glass engraving. But we have done that. Not last week sometime. We were doing glass engraving. So I was upcycling or recycling some coffee jars that I've got. So one of them got turned into sort of an undersea sort of scene. The other one got turned into a TARDIS. Mudkippers. What do I drink? When? You mean you see me drink now, and what am I drinking? This is tea. And the reason it's tea is I can drink cold tea easier than I can drink cold coffee. Although coffee stays hot for longer. But over a 2-hour stream the tea goes cold. And what I'm doing is relax. Well, it can be relaxing. It can be really frustrating as well. This is chainmaille, and I'm working with what I'm working with is with rings that are, if you can see one on the end of there, 3.2 millimeters in diameter. And thank you. And they are. I'm not even sure you can see it against my hand, but it's tiny, and that can make it frustrating when you're trying to get such a tiny ring, which you can only just grasp with the pliers, into a space in here, sort of in the middle of there. Actually, I don't need to do it for this one. And that can sometimes sort of be really frustrating rather than relaxing, but when it's going quite well, then it goes relaxing. I do normally work with somewhat larger rings than that. Micromaille, as it's called, just because of them being so tiny, is a lot more. It's just a different, bit of fun. But I mean, that's kind of the normal size ring, and the one next to it, the little one, that's the one I'm working with at the moment. And as you can see, one easily fits within the other without a problem. And those aren't the biggest ones that I work with either, but it is an example. In fact, this here bracelet is this stainless steel, and the rings with this were slightly bigger than the one you just saw a minute ago, and that's can be easy to work with. They can still be as frustrating sometimes when you're trying to put a ring in a place. A full chainmail armour made out of stuff like that would probably be a life's work. But yeah, I tell you what, it would be like cloth. It would be extremely fluid. I mean, this is really quite fluid, and this is a tube. So this is being made into a tube, but if this was sort of in a sheet, it would flow like water. But it would, you know, to add an inch to this takes an hour. So can you imagine a full suit, chainmail suit, made out of rings this tiny? Would take months of work, and it really would be sort of what would you call it, a labour of love to have to do something like that. It certainly wouldn't be something that would be I was about to say practical to sort of go out and buy. I mean, the amount of hours that would go into doing that would just make such a suit several tens of thousands of pounds probably. But satisfying, yes, it can be, especially well, some of the weaves. He says, getting one out from under his cuff, like this one here, not that one, but this one. This weave is a notoriously difficult one to start, and when you start this weave, or with a lot of chainmail weaves, there's something that there's a phenomenon which sort of gets described as when it goes stable. But when you start this weave and you start from the end, you've got to hold about 4 or 5 rings in your hand, and they can't move, because if they do move, they drop out of the pattern that you're holding them in. And if they do that, you then have to spend an awfully long time putting them back into the pattern before you can get another ring in. But once you've got about 10 rings in that sequence, then it's what it gets described as being self-supporting. It doesn't fall apart, and it then becomes easy to put it down, pick it up, and just add extra rings to it. But until you get to that point, it is a royal pain in the neck, because if you do let go, which is rather hard not to do because you need to use 2 pliers, then you lose that pattern, and it can take half an hour or more to put them back. What I used to do was basically just stop and start again because it was quicker. But when I learnt a technique to do it, that was really satisfying, because I can start one of these things now first time every time, and that is kind of a really satisfying thing to be able to do. But I find it just satisfying to sort of, when you get a weave, whichever, whether it's this one, that looks good when you've put it together. I'm looking at that and I can see the spiral in it, which is what I intended. Or even this thing, which is so tiny and just looks so nice. That in itself is, as you say, a satisfying thing, that you've been able to produce something like that, or something as complicated looking as this, and it's right, and it sparkles and shiny. Yeah, one of those. It kind of was, because I mean, literally all it is a piece of wire that I put through, which holds it. But once I kind of went, hang on a minute, if I do that, then they don't fall apart. And that was literally sort of a eureka moment. I'm sure other people have found that in the past, but I mean, I know there's at least one other chainmail person on here on Twitch that didn't know that, can't actually remember. I've told him, but you know, he finds it really difficult to start this particular pattern, and there's a couple of variants of it which are also similarly difficult. And one of the things that chainmailers often do is, having successfully made a bracelet, for example, of that weave, what they do is they'll extend it by, you know, the first time they do it, they'll extend it by 1 inch and then take that last inch off, so they've got the bracelet, but they've then left with 1 inch or so of stable chain. What they do then when they want to make another one is they add to the end of it and then take the last inch off again, and just keep doing that, so they keep the stable bit. But it's one of those things that and I use a tie wrap now, and I just, you know, put the rings. It's 3 rings. Feed the tie wrap through the 3 rings, and then I just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and by the time I've got the 5th ring in, it's stable. I generally leave the tie wrap in just because it's easy to hold on to the tail, but yeah, then I'm away. And it was the first time I did that, it was so good not to spend 30 minutes you know, trying to put the thing back together, because I'd sort of put it down on the desk, or it had just slipped slightly, and it was you know, because up until that point, when that happens to you, it is really frustrating. You know, you might get sort of, shall we say, 9 out of the 10 rings in before it goes, you know, the 10th ring would make it stable. You get the 9th in and you drop it, because it's easy enough to do sometimes when you're manipulating these. The pliers just slip, and it slips out of the pliers and it drops on the desk, and you've got 9 out of the 10. And you've got to spend an hour sorting it out or start again. That's frustration. I'm sure a lot of people do, actually, to be honest, mudkippers, because you know, it's at that point. I know in the past I really want to throw this against the wall at that point myself. And I've, you know, you persevere, because, you know, I like that particular pattern, and I enjoy making that particular pattern, and so I kind of continued and persevered, even, you know, and even before I learnt the trick, and then after that it became easy then, but it to some extent, it's like, I guess it happens in whatever else. I mean, it's like game players, isn't it? Once you learn a game, whatever game it is, you know, you're playing, like these, you know, first-person shooters, for example. You kind of learn how your character moves, or you learn the way, you know, people use the map and things like that, and therefore you get better at it. And it's kind of like the same thing. You know, I've learned that shortcut, and now it's more fun for me. I cannot keep going out of shot on that camera. I'm not used to that camera. That's a new camera to me. That one at the top right of the screen. See, like there, I'm feeling a little bit frustrated now, because I can't get that ring in. Actually, it probably is because that one's opening a little bit more. Come on, there we go. You gotta when you start with these rings, you actually have to open them to wide enough so that you can actually get another ring through the gap. That's how you weave them. And if you don't quite, as the one I was trying a moment ago, it never will go through, and that's, you know, seeing that it helps avoid frustration as well. Of the triangle setup. Oh, the 3-angle setup, yeah. For something like, well, I'm not sure quite how well it works for chainmail. For when I do things like the carving, it is kind of why I was experimenting with the third camera, because when I'm doing carving, I may sort of be holding a chisel that's like this over the top of something, so this camera can't see what I'm doing, but that one, of course, you can see what I'm doing here. So it was to try and give that sort of a view, and this one's on a tripod, so it's a bit easier to pick up and move. I was sort of thinking about maybe trying to set that one up for close-up, but it's really hard to work with close-up cameras. You kind of need somebody operating cameras to work on close-up, because as you can imagine that if I've got even now I've still got a little bit of a trouble getting in view of that top right-hand camera, but thank you. I just started using it yesterday, so I am still, will still for some time be learning just how to use the camera in the broadcast. Yes, I am going through the right thing. So, is broadcasting anything you do mid mud kippers, or do you just go watching the streams? The biggest work I've done out of micro rings, this. I've kind of always known that micro rings would be a long project, just because of the quantity, the size that they actually. Any sort of big piece, if you see what I mean, is going to have lots and lots of rings, in several hundred rings. In fact, there's probably going to be closer. Well, there's going to be nearly 500 rings, I think, in this chain when I've finished. Sorry, I've just lost where I am. So whilst I've made little test pieces before, just to see what a particular weave looked like in micro, I never actually done a piece. So this is actually the first time I've actually done a piece in micro. And there's something, what's this? I don't actually know how long this is at the moment. Do it in inches. This is 5 inches long. There's 5 hours. There's over 5 hours of work in this at the moment. You just watch streams. That's okay. That's actually how I started on Twitch, watching streams. Anything? I mean, you're in creative now, obviously. Is that something that you prefer to or like watching as opposed to the game streams, or is it this just a walk on the wild side to see what's out there? Or, I mean, if you watch creative regularly, what sort of things do you watch? Kind of, there's so many different things in creative. I find that I almost always find something to watch. But then again, I do like watching things being creative, creative acts. So people, whether it's people sort of doing wood turning, carving, woodwork, clay work, all sorts of stuff, which I can watch for hours. You dare yourself to watch different things? Okay. Well, that's an interesting thing. So, what sort of things have you found that have made you want to sort of, or hopefully made you want to go back and watch before you challenged yourself to stay? I'm not quite sure what that says about these stream mudkippers. Ah dear. It's that bad that you've got to. It's that bad a stream that you've got to challenge yourself to actually stay and watch. Yeah. But at least thank you for the compliment on the craft. I mean, just as talking about the craft itself, on that third panel down on the right hand side, you can see there's a lot of pictures. A lot of those is chainmail. They've all been done live on stream, so they're all pictures that were taken. They weren't taken during the stream, but they were taken afterwards. So all of those have been pieces that have been done on stream. So that's sort of the variety and colours and different varieties of chain styles that can be made. Yeah, I do like to have I kind of know what you mean. I do like to have a sort of a chill stream, relax. It's relaxing for me as well. I mean, this is an art or a craft, and being able to relax doing it is part of it. It's the end of my sort of working day, and it's kind of like a hobby. Although, having said which, these are available for sale as well if anybody who's watching had an interest in doing so. You're looking at the Etsy shop as well. Okay, thank you. I'm losing. Yeah, that one there. I was going to say there's the Etsy shop there as well. I actually meant the pictures that's on the screen, but you can see them better in the shop. But I mean, if chainmail starts to interest you to seeing, there is a couple, at least a couple of other streamers that I do know have stream it. One guy to keep a lookout for is a guy called Mr. Boombati in Creative, although he does play games as well sometimes. He's been doing chainmail for a really long time, and he is really good at it. So he's often a good, fascinating one to look out for if you want to see more chainmail. Don't think he does it every stream, but he does it fairly frequently. And another one to look out for, although he tends to stream mainly at lunch during the mornings, is I know his Aero's design, but I don't think that's his stream name. I've forgotten his stream name now. Thank you very much anyway for the compliment on the shop contents. Yeah, Mr. Boombati and AD Fall Guy, that's the name. AD Fall Guy. I think he does stream on maybe a Wednesday. I can't remember his schedule now. I know he streams. I think it's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings in the UK, and I think 1 or 2 evenings as well. And he's doing 2 things at the moment. He's doing some chainmail streams, but he's also doing some game development streams. And I know there's another guy that does it but I literally cannot remember his name. I haven't seen him for a while, but that's mainly because I've been too busy to check out other streams. He works mainly in a what I'm using here is called anodized aluminium. It's effectively been dyed as the aluminium. He works with, mainly I've seen, with what they call bright aluminium, which is sort of aluminium that's not been anodized, it's not been dyed, it's just been polished. So the raw aluminium has been polished. He says, am I working with... No, actually, he works with this stuff. This is bright aluminium. I'd forgotten. That's anodized, this is bright, and there is a slight difference, as you can see. Or hopefully you can see. The bright aluminium actually isn't as bright as the anodized aluminium, but they're both silver. I'm looking at this thinking, I'm sure that's, yeah, I'd forgotten. Forgotten what I'm actually working with, but given that I'm working with 500 of them in this chain. It can be fiddly. That's the other thing about Micromaille. I mean, it's beautiful stuff to get a chain that small, chainmaille that small, using this particular weave, which is called round maille because it looks round when you've done it. You are working with these tiny rings. You can't get much smaller than that, just because of it's so difficult to work with tiny rings. But I forgot where I was going with that. I can't remember. I was going to say something about it, but I can't remember what on earth I was going to say. I think just the size sometimes is probably. I probably was going to say the size sometimes is just a little bit frustrating, just because you are trying to hold it and work with such tiny things. I have a fascination for working with small, tiny, small scale things. I like I do a little bit of model making, which is not something I do on stream, but I like the tiny models, the small models. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm so nimble these days, but yeah. So I've got I fly remote control model helicopters, for example, and I've got a couple which are sort of they are smaller than that bracelet in length. They're only about half the length of that, and I just find them fascinating to fly little tiny things like that. So the Micromaille appeals to me because of that. So this is kind of in the way of an experiment to see what it was like. Because one of the things I have been thinking about is you can get, there is a material which is called memory wire, which is used in jewellery, and it's wire that isn't very easy to bend, to be honest. It comes in a coil. And it's used usually for making bracelets without a clasp, because you can just wrap it around your wrist, and it expands or shrinks, obviously. Shrinks to fit anybody's wrist. I was thinking about putting one down the centre of this, which would then form it into a coil, and then you wouldn't need a clasp on the end of it, as something different. And the other thing is, it needs then to be about 10 inches long as opposed to 7.5 or 7 inches, which would be a normal bracelet length for a woman, for example. But so this is kind of in the way of an experiment, but I'm not sure I'll probably be doing too many more, just because I have been doing this, I think now for about six hours, which is an awfully long time. It's going to be beautiful when it's done, and I think what I'll probably end up with doing with this is giving it away as a present to Lady Zara, my wife, because I'm not sure commercially anybody would want to pay the price that it costs to make. My fascination with small things is because I enjoy the model making, I'm kind of interested in model railways because of the model making. And one of the ones I'm interested in is something called T-scale. The T stands for 3, and it's 3 millimeters, and what it means is it's 3 millimeters between the tracks. So literally the track that for that scale is so small this ring would not fit between the tracks because this is bigger. Okay. I don't actually know what a BJD doll is, but yeah, you making the clothes. Wow, that's an amazing skill to do. Have you ever thought about maybe doing something like that and streaming it on Twitch as well? Let other people see how you do that sort of thing? Or ball jointed doll? Oh, okay. Yeah, I know the sort of thing you mean. Eat more chips! Hello! You're too shy. So am I! Eat more chips, welcome to the stream. I'm a very shy person. I mean, there's nobody else in the room here. I'm by myself. There is something different about doing it with a camera. That makes it slightly different. It's not completely different, but it is slightly different. A lot of time it is the presence of other people that makes shy people uncomfortable. Not so much when you're doing it on the end of a camera where you can't see the people. But it really is just practice and then the confidence that comes from doing it. I mean, if you wanted to take a look at YouTube, some of my very early broadcasts are on YouTube now. I'm gradually uploading them, and I talk a lot more differently now than I did back then. And it's kind of it's easy to say, and it's easy to say that most people, a lot of people don't care whether you're shy or not. They're not that. I know when you are, you kind of think everybody's looking at you, or they're thinking this or that about you, and it's easy for me to say they're not. But I mean, one of the jobs I've done in the past is as sales. I've worked in sales, and normally shy people do not do well in sales. Because you have to talk to people. You have to go into a room of people you don't know, and you have to talk to them. And I kind of just went ahead and did it, and that kind of got me over. I still don't particularly enjoy going into a room full of people and talking to them, but I can do it. Mudkippies, thank you very much for the follow. That is really kind of you. I've just put those rings on there, and I'm now wondering where I'm going next. There. This is I was about to say a real simple pattern. Well, a lot of them are simple patterns, but sometimes I look at the piece of work and go, now where's my next ring supposed to go? And it is in this particular pattern. There's two sequences. You put rings in one way, and then the next row you put them in a different way, and then you repeat that pattern backwards and forwards. I'm doing quite well, Eat More Chips, and how are you doing? Nice to. I was about to say nice to see you around again, but I mean, was it last week? I think you were last in. I'm kind of lots of busy stuff going on at work and at the moment, and it's sort of just a generally busy time for me, and so I'm hopping from one thing to another during the day, and when I come home at night doing almost the same thing. That's good. You know, I tell you what, I am really half asleep, Anna. We were only talking, was it yesterday? Or the day before? Because of course, yeah, the day before, Instagram pictures, wasn't it? Oh dear. Yes, Eat More Chips is an artist. Yes, I sort of took a closer look at some of the photographs after the stream as well, and not for the drawings. Yeah, the other day. Sorry, it's my days just go probably before the weekend, I think, wasn't it? My days sometimes just go so quickly that I am sort of completely losing track as to what it is. And over the weekend I spent a heck of a lot of time trying to make this third camera work, that I just lost completely what day it was. Yeah, I was looking at your drawings, which are really rather good drawings, as you say. I think at the end of the other day, what I was going to say is, if you were to want to develop them a little bit more, what I'd suggest you working out is shading. Used to be a kindergarten teacher, and you're saying this looks like it needs patience. Oh, that is a. I've taught adults, and that's bad enough. Thank you. Yeah. Maybe that is a good reason why you ought to perhaps try some Twitch streaming, Mudkipis, because that doesn't have to get you interacting with people. I don't know if you're shy, that's kind of awkward. And as a kindergarten teacher, you just think about being a kindergarten teacher to everybody that's on Twitch. I mean, sometimes in some streams that's kind of what you sometimes feel like with some of the people that come into the streams. But it's certainly a way in which it can make days not boring. That's for sure. Yeah, Eat More Chips. I think. Yeah, I was saying is, if you work a little bit more on shading, that's what adds the dimensionality to images and makes them change from being 2D to 3D, and shows you the shape of things. So, like the trees, for example. If you shade one side of them, then it starts to look curved as opposed to a flat thing, and that will change your the whole feel of your pictures. And if you put a shadow on the floor, for example, that's another trick that adds to the dimensionality and to depth, and will again sort of give you a completely different perspective on your pictures. Oh, that's all right. Yeah, no problem. If you Yeah. Watch me and do your own crafts, that's fine. Maybe I'll inspire you to try chainmail or wood carving or scraperboard or pyrography or punchcraft or glass engraving. They're all things that get done on this stream from time to time. We're doing glass engraving last week, and I think the last couple of days has just been a real chill sort of I was about to say no skill, but a low skill magic dots stream. So, but there's a real variety of crafts get done here. Okay, yeah, that's that was the thing that sort of. So just working out what I'm doing. That was the thing that I sort of missed a little bit when I was looking at your pictures. That, and that. Okay. There, right. I lost where I was. You already did? Oh, I already did, okay. Well, I kind of would say if you're new to chainmail, I'd start with some bigger ones, to be honest. If you've not done chainmail before, it's so sort of 1/4 inch or 3/8 rings. I don't know what they are in metric off the top of my head. 4 or 5 millimeter rings. I think I'd probably suggest these sorts of sizes, which is slightly smaller than that silver one I showed you, but just from the point of view of it's easier to manipulate them if you've not done much chainmail. It's easier to manipulate them with a pair of pliers. When they're larger, they're easier to hold. The holes that you're trying to feed a ring through are easier to see because they're larger holes. And when you're starting, but if you really like a challenge, then by all means start with Micromaille. But they are, as I say, they are a challenge. Well, you can do it. You can certainly do it. Of course, you have to get the ones that you can that have a gap in them that you can pull apart and put back together again. But you can do it. It would be, yeah. When you're working with chainmail, the weaves that you can do with any particular ring are governed, or rather, which rings you can use for any particular weave. It's the same question, just the other way around. Is governed by something called the aspect ratio, and it's kind of like a golden number for rings. So how do you join them back together again? Eat more chips. But yeah, it's governed by this sort of magic number, the aspect ratio, which is the diameter, the inside. Yeah, I think it's the inside diameter of the ring divided by the diameter of the wire that's used to make the ring. And So the actual physical size of the ring doesn't really, in terms of diameter, like a hula hoop or a micro ring, doesn't have the same impact as you might think it does. It's actually the ratio that matters between the two. So I can have a ring that's this size with a particular ratio, and I can have one an inch across that's got exactly the same ratio, and they will do exactly the same weaves. And if the little tiny ring won't do a particular weave, the big one won't do it either. And so it's the aspect ratio that matters. So I was just thinking then what the aspect ratio of a hula hoop would be. And actually, this weave here, which is a variation on something called a box weave, actually wouldn't work with a hula hoop. It'd fall apart. It would sort of lay like this, but really wouldn't. It would literally fall apart, and it actually wouldn't be a stable weave. So you'd actually have a devil-own job trying to get round mail in hula hoops. Glue. Okay, eat more chips. Edible glue, I hope. Have I got that right? It just seems a bit tight, yeah. Something's off. Something feels off with this. Am I just... No, it's right. It just looks odd. So yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. It's sort of that a bigger ring doesn't necessarily mean that you can do if a weave doesn't work with a small ring, it doesn't necessarily mean the bigger ones do it either. Usually what you end up what you end up doing when you're looking for rings is you're not only looking for you're not only looking for the internal diameter, which is what I mentioned, but it's the wire size as well, and so you get that aspect ratio. So when you look up things like the weaves, if you look at a site called Maille Artisans, for example, is a good place to look at different weaves. They will quote you when they tell you about a weave. What they'll do is they'll say this weave has a range of aspect ratios, like say 2 to 4, with an ideal one of 3 or 3.5 or something like that. And they don't sort of say you need a 1/4 inch ring, because the actual size doesn't matter. It's the aspect ratio, and what they mean by that is sort of the smallest aspect ratio might be that the weave is really tight, so it hardly bends, for example, but it does bend, but just not very much. And the other end of the aspect ratio means the thing is close to falling apart. If you put it down on the desk, it tends to look like a bundle of rings that you've dropped, but when you pick it up, it sort of works. It comes back together, so to speak. Whereas the ideal one in the middle is that they specify means that it holds its shape, whatever shape was intended, without any sort of need to hang it. It will sit like that on your hand, for example, in the ideal shape, and so you tend to want to stay around the ideal one. But sometimes you can experiment either way, and it might be that you actually want something that just flows a little bit better. I mean, these rings I'm using here, they're not quite the ideal size because this collapses very slightly. You probably can't see it on the camera, but if I squeeze it gently, and I mean really gently, it goes oval. It doesn't stay round. So it feels a little bit squishy to me. Whereas if it was using the ideal aspect ratio, it would stay feeling round. So it's slightly off but not much, because as you can see when I put it on my hand it still maintains that round shape. It needs that little bit of pressure to push it out of shape. So I can look at that and go, that could perhaps have done with a very slightly different aspect ratio, but sometimes when you're buying these tiny rings you get what you can get, and that's about it. Hello, Eat More Chips, welcome back. I've put one ring in there and I now need to work out where I've put it so I can carry on with the rest. There is where I put it, so I know where to put the next one. Okay. Luckily this is a relatively simple weave, which is easy to work out where you are in it. The stainless steel one that's on the desk here, this one, I was doing that one on stream and I took I think it was something like a couple of weeks break halfway through, and when I came to start it again, it took something like about 3/4 of an hour on the stream to work out just where I got to carry on, because this one is I don't know if you can see it, but it's got a spiral pattern in it, and if you don't start it in exactly the right place in the sequence, that spiral gets broken and it becomes very visible. And so I must have started about 3 times and gone, that's not right, taking the rings back out, studied it some more, and so now whenever I stop something like this, I get my a tie wrap out and put the tie wrap through where the next ring has to go, because whilst you're doing it you remember it, but a couple of weeks later, just in case, and I did actually take another break on this one and I remembered to put the tie wrap in, and I went, oh, that's where I am, and just carried it straight on, which was fantastic. Am I wearing a banana shirt? It's gold. It's not yellow, it's gold. Although I guess I don't know whether the cameras are. Actually, I'm surprised you can even. Oh, yeah, you can see it up here, can't you? On the face cam. I was trying to think then, how can you see what shirt I'm wearing? What you're getting is the lights reflecting. It looks yellow, yeah. If I put that on, that maybe look. I mean, the cameras always have a problem with colour. These cameras, but that look more gold. Probably you can see it in the top right hand frame. Is got more of a gold. It is actually gold, but I mean, I've got daylight bulbs here. And they're LEDs, the daylight LEDs, the cool white, and it's probably affecting the cameras a little bit, and certainly obviously on my shoulders there's a lot of light pointing down. You call anything that's yellow banana? Well, I suppose gold does contain yellow. Okay, I'll let you get away with that. Actually, I suppose if you imagine banana skin, it probably is quite close, but it's supposed to be gold. I guess, does that Eat More Chips? Does that mean you go around saying, "Look at that big banana in the sky"? At least it's not mouldy bananas. Well, I do have some black shirts somewhere. Actually, I've got more black t-shirts, and I've got one black shirt, I think. That, by the way, is a very useful, or something similar to this is very useful for working with chainmail. This one is it's just a metal pointed tool. Actually, you're probably familiar with them, Mudkippis, because it's kind of like a sewing tool for, you know, like punching a hole through a piece of material or something like that. But a cocktail stick works just as well to push through some rings sometimes, just to get them aligned, or to, as I'm doing here, to make sure there's a path through, so that when I can then feed the ring through a little bit easier. Sometimes that doesn't work like then, because sometimes what you need is the rings. You're trying to put it through two rings, and it's really difficult to show when it's Micromaille. And the two rings have to be sort of side by side in order for you to get your this ring through. And if they're not exactly side by side, there just isn't the space. And if they slip out of place, it just becomes frustrating. So sometimes, you know, that sort of sharp, pointy object is really useful for aligning rings. The banana in the sky looks white to you. Well, I've seen it. I've seen it look so strawberry coloured, for example, and all sorts of things in between. Sugar cube. Now you think you're in a Minecraft world, don't you? Sugar cube in the sky. One thing about sticking close to ideal ratio as well, at least when you start, is that the rings will tend to sit in their intended position. So these rings here flop about a little bit. Not so bad, but they do tend to flop about a bit. If this was an ideal aspect ratio, they'd actually want to stay in position, which makes it a bit easier when you're beginning, because you can then see where the next ones want to go. If you were trying out chainmail for the first time, I would probably recommend you try something like either box weave or Byzantine weave. And Byzantine is one that gets used in an awful lot of jewellery. It's one that you often do see in jewellery. Box is less common. They're kind of a variation on each other. Once you understand how they're both made, you can, by practicing it a bit, you can see why they're a variation on each other. But they are very easy weaves to start. I mentioned earlier about the one that's on my wrist that's really hard to start, which is called a half Persian, and that's not one you want to start with as a beginner, because of that reason. But the Byzantine and the box are stable from the third ring, and the third ring is basically the first one where you're actually doing any weaving. So from that point on, once you put your fourth ring in, if you like, I suppose, it's stable, and it's a bit hard to hold, but it is stable. It's very easy to put back into position when you drop it in, and you can build up from there fairly quickly. It also builds into a chain, quite a lengthy chain, quite quickly as well, which helps when you're a beginner, because that gets over I'm doing a lot of work and nothing's happening. With something like this, for example, I mean, I measured it earlier, at least half an hour or so earlier in the stream, at 5 inches. It's now 5.5. And that's after sort of half the stream. And the stream's been going now about 2 hours, so that's, you know, that's another thing that perhaps against Micromaille, certainly as a beginner, is that the length of time it takes to sort of even add a small amount of what, you know, what is can be perceived as a small amount is just such a long length of time. Oops. So that ring went somewhere. Actually, it went over there. Because I can see it. So come back. You're not getting away that easily. In fact, there's another one over there as well. Make some chainmail. That's actually something that Mudkipper said earlier. Can you imagine, eat more chips, just how long it would take to make a sheet long enough for anything in chainmail at this rate? A 2-year stream. Yeah, and some probably. And some. Actually, when I've completed this, I won't say we'll find out, because I'm not intending to make chainmail armour. But one of the things I do want to have at least start to see what it's like and how long it might take is to create a band. So there's a couple of bracelets which are bands using 4-in-1 sheet, I think it is. So there's a couple of, like, I think the Seashore Ripples is one in the shop and shows up on the roll, and the other one's a Tiger Stripe, I think. Both of those are you know, they're bands, they're flat sheets, but thin flat sheets. What I want to try doing is a similar band, not necessarily that wide, but a similar band with Micromaille. So that involves making a sheet, which may be like an inch wide or half an inch wide, maybe, I don't know, something in that sort of order. So we'd actually be able to then sort of get a good estimate of just how long it might take to do something like a full suit of armour. So if like a square inch, for example, takes 4 hours, then you could do the maths. But I would say that doing a suit of chainmail in this stuff would be no good for protection, but it wouldn't half be flexible. It literally would be like cloth, because of the so tiny ring sizes. It would flow like material. Yeah, there's a few more rings. Okay. What I'm going to do on this stream is I'm just going to use up the rings that I've got in front of me. I'm not going to open any more, but I will use up what I've got here. Would it be lighter? No, actually, it would probably be. I suspect it would be heavier than one using bigger rings of the same metal. Just because the actual density? I suppose. Oh, it's an interesting question. I mean, my first thought was the density, because these rings are in closer physically in closer proximity to each other. So what you end up trading off is that you might get 4 of these rings, say. So if you were using, let's say you used rings that are this size to do it, you might end up using 4 of these in the same space that one of those takes up. So you've got an increased density of metal. But there again, this is thicker than this. So I guess it really comes down to sort of actual volume of metal per unit area. And I don't know. I literally don't know. It's kind of like 4 of these heavier than one of those. And that's making a total assumption as to whether these are, that's exactly what you'd need and what have you. But so it would be an interesting. It almost feels like a trick question, Not suggesting that you meant it that way. It's just. It's sort of 4 half-sized objects the same size as 2 full-sized objects. However, it's probably not something I'm ever gonna find out, because I'm not about to do it. And to be honest, I don't think anybody could pay me to do that. Should you watch a film tonight? How on earth should I know that? Oh. If you mean, am I going to carry on streaming for much longer, therefore, you might want to stick around, or am I going to stop shortly so that, you're going to have time to watch the end of the film? Well, I've got about a dozen rings left. So that probably means that you'll have time to watch a film. Hello Mudkippers, welcome back. You've just missed the interesting. That was an interesting idea as to why you randomly said that. Okay. Now, well, you say it's me being self-centered. Why else would you be asking me about what? Because I'm shy, you see. I can't conceive of anybody being interested in anything else but me. That one. Well, I think Mudkippers, you've certainly met your challenge this evening. I'm thinking that tomorrow night I am, just to give you some advanced notice, I was kind of thinking whether I wanted to do more of this, which I might do. But the other thing I was thinking of is I've got a pyrographic picture to finish, which is of Theo the kitten, which is well, I was about to say it's almost finished. I don't actually know how close it is to being finished, but it is something that oh, he's over there. It is something that I was thinking I might do tomorrow, because the way in which I used to stream was I would sort of do a different thing each night. I do, and sort of, you know, like a series, if you like. So Mondays was always doing carving, Tuesdays was always doing pyrography, and then you know, each Tuesday I'd just carry on with the same project. Might start doing that again. Not sure. I'm not sure because it's a little bit of inconvenient, shall we say, to keep getting out and putting away pyrographic tools and carving tools, and it's quite easy to sort of carry on with the same thing for a few nights. But so I might do a slight variation on it, but that's sort of something I was thinking. I'm not sure tomorrow night. I don't know if either of you have a preference. For example, if you were interested in coming back tomorrow night, what might you be interested in seeing? Because of course, to some extent, I'm happy doing either. I mean, it's that's partly what the stream is for me, is a chance to do any or all of these things. If there's one that people who might want to watch have a preference for, then I don't mind taking that into consideration. Yeah, putting stuff. I mean, the other way of looking at it is maybe to sort of do like 3 or 4 days on the one thing and then switch. I mean, what I will say, partly the reason why sort of I switch is it's not that I get bored with doing some things, but I get to the point where I would like to try something else for a while. Because I have a, relatively speaking, an inordinate amount of patience. I mean, there are times where something, you know, will frustrate me, like trying to put these rings, which I'll go, you know what, I'm going to walk away from that. And I can feel my insides tightening up when that's happening, and I know that, you know, that's the time to walk away. But if I were, you know, if I needed to finish this, I can keep doing this for, you know, hours on end, and actually sort of managed to complete it if that was what was required. But you know, if you read below the stream window, it kind of says I'm actually I can't remember what it says, but something along the lines of I've got a short attention span, and I like trying different things. Yes, thank you, Mud Kippers, for saying. I keep saying Mud Kippers. Kippis, I suppose is it, but excuse me. I don't eat them, but kippers are, and I don't actually know where you are, but kippers are a name of something that you can eat in the UK. And I'm sure you can get them elsewhere, but I don't eat them. I don't actually like them, and they're usually smoked. But that I keep wanting to say the same thing, or I'm actually also wanting to say mud skipper, because of course that is an animal. So I keep mispronouncing your name, for which I apologise. Thank you, just call you Mud. That sounds... No, that one sounds a little bit too much. That sounds a little bit too self-deprecating as that one, Mud Kippis. I do in general like to try and use the names that people choose. I mean, you know, it's sometimes it's kind of annoying when people shorten your name in real life, and it's You know, why should it be any different just because you've chosen one for yourself? But there again, I sort of do occasionally do that with like heat more chips. I don't add the 44 to the end of it. Did you ever tell me why there's 44 at the end, eat more chips? Is it just literally the 43 others that when you tried to use it and so you had to add the 44 to it, or was there a reason that I can't remember? Okay, I won't. You have no... Oh, okay. I was going to say I could think of a couple of reasons, one of which may or may not be insulting. Especially if you knew one thing about me, which is I am really terrible at judging people's ages. You regret it. I remember the first stream. Actually, I don't remember what the first stream was when you came in, but I do remember on the first stream as discussing the actual advisability of eating more chips. Well, it would be a guess, and I'm not going to do it, but you have given away some clues. Not many, but you've been a teacher, which sounded like, which means you've been through teacher training, so that's at least 3 years, he says, thinking, and then you've been in class for a period of time, so let's say it's at least another year, so that puts a minimum on things. Yeah, but I can say the same thing, eat more chips. Yeah, I'm not 44. I'm also not 16. Doesn't give a lot away. But I think I know what you meant by that. I once did. I stopped guessing a long time ago because one of the people I worked with at the time was having a birthday, and they were having a big O birthday, and I asked the question, which one was that? Was it 40? And I stopped guessing after that. Luckily it wasn't 20. There's one of the things with a lot of these metals, mud kippers, if you want to try working with rings and chainmail, is, he says I've lost it now. When you the metal has kind of a memory, so when you bend it into position, as I do here to close up the gap. It's that ring there, I think. Yeah, it is. It remembers where it's come from, and it's a bit like a spring, and it wants to go back to that position, to the open position, so you can close them perfectly. And when you do that, part of what you do is you're actually pushing them together so that you sort of push them to you push the rings together as you close them, and then you sort of have to ease them back out slightly to actually put join the two ends together. And part of the idea is that they push against each other with enough force that the friction holds them locked in alignment. And but if you, especially with these small rings like this, but sometimes you can't get them with enough force to each other, or the rings are just that way out, and they start to want to open slightly, and they'll sort of do that and split apart, just because they relax, and ultimately you have to come back and just sort of realign them, and then they stay. But when they open up slightly like that, you can see the cut ends. They tend to sparkle and shine back at you, and so as you're working through, you sometimes see this sort of flash of light, and you get, okay, one of the rings has shifted. So you have to find it and then realign it. But it is something that to some extent, no matter how carefully you close them, they do shift slightly. You have to go back. Autocorrect. What browser are you using that's got autocorrect in it, Eat More Chips? I hadn't noticed one. Because of course on Twitch, if you start typing I don't know if it's Twitch or Chrome that I'm using, or better Twitch TV. If you start typing, you can hit tab and the name comes up straight in. You've been working on cars today? Yeah, Nance cars. I don't bother these days. I used to a long time ago, but to be honest, anything sort of engine-wise, well, anything other than sort of simple replacement is, you need the electronics to do it. I don't bother. I mean, I can change the odd component, but having said which, there again, these days I'd much rather do something else. So I don't work on cars much. You love, yeah. Oh, I know. Lots of people do. It can be quite fascinating. I mean, the sort of thing that sort of fascinates me a little bit, and I mean in my car, everything, virtually everything is on one computer bus. So there's an electronics stack which is in the boot, which is is on the same electronics bus as the speedo, which is on the same bus as the light control module, and I find that kind of really sort of fascinating, and I sort of am half tempted to sort of go get an OBD port interface, so I can actually read the signals on the bus just to see what's going on. You can't drive yet, but you can still work. Yeah. I learnt to drive when I was 14, 15, something like that. And I learnt to drive by learning to drive a tractor. And I can always remember that. Partly because you always remember these sorts of things. But with a tractor, when you can put it in its gearing such that you can crawl faster than it can move. So from the point of view of learning to drive, it's kind of quite safe in that respect. I mean, they can go quite fast as well, but you have to sort of change gears. So it was quite a good way of learning to steer. And then with a tractor, you don't need to change gears because you can start in quite a high gear and it will just go because it's got that much power. But you can actually change gears if you want. So I learned to change gears and to steer and things like that, and use a clutch on a tractor before I ever got anywhere near a road. That was before I even got a motorbike or anything like that. Oh, you've done it too? Ah, okay, yeah. I mean, back then these days they're the tractors these days are somewhat. I'm assuming that they kind of still operate the same way, but they are so much more complicated with the shuttle controls. But you learnt on the tractor as well. Oh, that's interesting. 3 of us all learnt how to drive on a tractor. Mine was an old Massey Ferguson, what they called a TVR. You started it on paraffin and then changed over to diesel once it was running. And daft as it sounds, I do not have a license to drive a tractor. Nakamui, good evening. Welcome to the stream this evening. How are you? I like your badge, by the way. John Deere. Yeah. Oh well, you know, they weren't back then. Now those I don't know. I don't know those, but Valmet tractors. Yeah, I'm a little bit sort of more older than that Mudkippis. And yeah, I can. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember because there was 2 tractors I was driving at the time. One of them didn't have a foot throttle. The other one did. So it had a hand and a foot throttle, and the other one just had a hand throttle, which was quite an interesting thing to do. I've got 3 more rings left, which I need to open first before I can, or open more before I can put them in. I know when it was quite funny when I took my first driving lesson, because the driving instructor, of course, sat there and went through. You know, this is your brake pedal. This is your accelerator. This is your clutch. This is a gear. This sort of, you know, this is how you make it go, and you know, all these sorts of things. And I can remember myself going, yeah, and it was. I am sure it came across as sort of the typical sort of teenager who knows everything. A bit later, well, a few years later on, when I moved into my own house, I actually had a driving instructor as my next door neighbour. And one of the things he sort of always tells me is, he used to tell me was. Beginners, first time in the car, the first thing they always used to do is sort of drop their foot off the throttle so the car would jump and it would, you know, kangaroo and all this sort of stuff. And I know I surprised my driving instructor because I did a perfect start and a perfect gear, perfect in quotes, you know what I mean, but a gear change. All the way up to speed, and at which point he said, "I can remember him saying, do you happen to know how to drive?" Oh, an old Ford. Okay. Of course, you know, back then in the UK, which is where I am, of course, it was, you know, Massey Ferguson is and things like that, and, you know, the Fords and other stuff. Valmet is a Finnish tractor. Oh, okay. Your dad's a driving instructor. Does he actually want to give you driving lessons? Eat more chips? I would imagine he probably didn't. Or doesn't. It takes real patience to give driving lessons to a family member on both parts. Right. that's the last of the rings I've got out, and it's 10 past 10, so it is actually past my normal finishing time. So as I have finished with the rings, I'm not going to get any more out tonight. We are at 6 1/4 well, 6 inches, 6 and a bit. So there's only about another 3/4 of an inch to go. So that's about another string before that bracelet is finished. So that's one expensive. That is one expensive bracelet. Is that? It's probably going to be as expensive, if not more, than the cuff that's in the shop, the dragon scale cuff. But this probably has got more rings in it than the dragon scale cuff, and I think that one had something like about 400 rings in. Thank you very much. I find, you know, I don't know whether you are potentially being polite or not there, but I do find, now that I know how this is made, if you like, and the difficulties or the challenges of working with tiny rings, I certainly, if I saw somebody making one of these at this side, would go, that's awesome, just because I know of it. I kind of, a lot of people I know would go, well, that's just a chain, isn't it? You know, 10 minutes you can knock something like that together. Yeah, all right. And if you literally, I think, okay, I've been talking, and I have a slight tendency to stop when I'm talking while I've been doing this. And I think there's about 7 hours of work in that, including, you know, stream time, if you like, whilst I've been doing it. And I personally can see where it goes, but when you say that's about 2 hours, about 3 hours of stream time to do that one, and that so far is 7. It's not finished. It does give you a. In some ways, that's kind of one reason. I mean, I started doing chainmail because I saw somebody doing it on stream and it looked fascinating, and I wanted to try it, and he helped me out to get a kit to start doing it. And that's Eddie Fall Guy. And from there, but I started streaming doing things like the. Let's start with the carving. Yeah, carving, wasn't it? Because it was a relief carved rose. And well, that was part of the reason why I started streaming, was because to actually sort of let people have an appreciation, if you like, of just what goes into something that looks potentially simple. Or no, I don't have it to hand, but the rose, which looks quite simple. And yet there's several hours of work in a hand carving, and that's that's part of the reason for streaming, as well as the fact that I enjoy it. Okay, eat more chips. Have a great evening, and thanks very much for joining the stream this evening. I'm on my way out. I'm going to just I don't know who is watching this evening. There's a few people watching. I am going to just highlight, he says, probably not pointing very well because I haven't worked out where these cameras are, and there's a 3-second delay on them which makes it awkward. But the blue box at the bottom there's a number of URLs in there, and it's kind of obvious what they are, but not necessarily obvious what they are. The big one, of course, is everganart.com. Got to make it obvious, haven't I? That being my website, that actually has a little bit more information about some of the crafts in there, like the pyrography and chainmail, and it also has a little bit more information about some of the pieces, some of the chainmail pieces that were designed, the inspiration that came behind them being there. I mean, things like Misty Morning and things like that, and the pyrography pieces like Salute to Sunset is in there, and an explanation about what I felt about it, or what, the inspiration behind it. So that's always a good website to check out. There is a small shop there. By small I mean it's got 2 or 3 pieces in it. I must put more in it, but it's just time. And of course I've already mentioned the shop, zaragonart.etsy.com. This isn't in it, neither is this. They will at some point be in there, but there's a load of other ones like this is in there, various colours, and if anybody's interested in one in a different colour to what you see, just send a message. I will say there's no sterling silver in there. I am not able to sell sterling silver for legal reasons, basically. It has to be hallmarked, and I can't afford to do it on a single piece, basically. Otherwise I can't sell it as sterling silver. I have to sell it as silver coloured metal. And do you really want to buy something that is supposed to be sterling silver but can't be said to be sterling silver? I'm not confident in selling it. You will tip your friends. Thank you very much for that, Mudkippies. And of course Twitter. So you can get tweets from me. Generally those are, I'm going to start the stream soon, or I can't stream tonight, or thinking about doing this or doing that, or the occasional thing, hey, look at this beautiful snow picture outside the studio window, which is incidentally the sort of thing you'll find on the Facebook page as well. You can see things like the pictures outside the studio window in winter. It's like a postcard out there at times. And YouTube is having all the old broadcasts. I've got something like 700 hours of recorded broadcasts, which Twitch have now lost, of course, because they only keep it for so long. So I'm gradually going to upload those onto YouTube. So youtube.com/zaragonart if you want to see some of the really early ones before I got, when I was less good than I am now. I'm not saying how good I am now. And so, and what else is left? That's about it on there, although there is Instagram, but I've only got a couple of pictures on there, so we'll not talk about that. And I will also point out the 2 buttons that are up there at the top right hand of the screen. The follow button, those of you who are watching who aren't following, it'd be fantastic if you did. Of course, it's entirely up to you. And if you want to consider assisting the stream, there's a subscription button up there as well. I believe for the whole of this month the half price, and I get all of it, well, sort of, when there's enough, and Twitch get nothing just for this month. So if you feel like supporting it in buying materials and tools and things, now that's nice timing, is that, from a digital assistant. I'm talking about supporting the stream, and the assistant goes, I'm not quite sure how to help you with that. You can subscribe to my stream, that's how you can help. That's nice timing. Okay. I will warn you, Mudkippers, it's a stream. It's a recording of a stream. It's in real time, so you get all the chat and not necessarily a lot of talking. A lot of things happening, and things like a carving takes about 5 or 6 streams, and so does the pyrography, or even longer. So they do go on for a while if you feel like watching them. But if you want something to run in the background while you're doing all your crafts and I'm not broadcasting, then feel free to run them. That assistant's done that about 3 times now. There must be something in me talking about subscriptions that triggers it to go off. You'll notice I'm very carefully not saying the name. Yeah. So I'm going to say thank you for watching. Wherever you are in the world, I hopefully will be on again tomorrow night from somewhere between 7 PM and 8 PM UK time. That's 1800, 1900 hours. UTC, GMT, they're both the same. So you will need to do a bit of maths if you're not in the UK to your own time zone. Hopefully that's a fairly simple sum. So I hope you've had some fun. I have. Thanks very much. See you the next time.